Hello, I'm Keith Talley, Director of the School of Music at Eastern Kentucky University, and I'm going to be speaking about sort of how the higher education system works in the United States in regards to music, and sort of some different facets of that. Through this discussion, talk about how students get into higher education music, how faculty look into it, and the general structure of what are varied size and configurations of music in higher education. So music in the United States really starts at the kindergarten or first grade level. So that's kind of where many people get their formal training start, and so I'd like to give a little bit of an overview of that process. So most most school districts, both private and public, kindergarten through 12th grade, offer music as part of the curriculum. Most of the time, when you're dealing with kindergarten through 5th or 6th grade, every student in the school is taking what we call general music, and that's offered to all the students in the school in both public and private. While general music does provide hopefully a lifelong skill set, finding your singing voice, beat competency, identification of instruments and styles, and how to listen critically to music. A lot of times general music curriculum pushes people toward being in an orchestra or being in choir or band. Few of our schools actually have built-in piano or guitar programs as part of the curriculum. Some of the larger school districts might have, at the high school level, some keyboarding or guitar, but for the most part, they might get a little bit of exposure in general music, but not enough to really be a specialist on that instrument. From about 7th grade on, students who are not in orchestra, band, or choir rarely have opportunities to be in a music group through the school system. Sometimes they have different ensembles. They might have a commercial music ensemble that doesn't lend itself to being in band, choir, or orchestra. But if you look at all the music, all the school systems, K through 12 in the U.S., the vast majority stop teaching music to every student around 6th or 7th grade. When we start looking at the high schools, grade 9 through 12, most high schools have a marching band in addition to a concert band. In some parts of the country, the marching band is very, very popular and very expensive to run, with very ornate shows and complex movements. We have a drum and bugle corps tradition for upper high school and college level students that has really taken root in many states at the high school level, and they're trying to duplicate that sort of regimented, very production-oriented performances. Starting in the 1970s, there were a number of jazz musicians, Stan Kenton being one of them, that really pushed to have jazz in the public school system. Because of those efforts, most high schools have some sort of jazz program. It is America's music, and it's very well represented in high schools and universities across the U.S. Some states, especially in the southern part of the United States, it's becoming more and more common to have mariachi bands. We have a lot of Spanish-speaking students in a lot of the kind of border states, and that culture has permeated the local communities. So it's something that we don't have in every state, but a lot of the southern states do have mariachi groups as part of their high school offerings. Bigger schools sometimes do have class piano or class guitar, but oftentimes these are introductory type of things and not as fully fleshed out as the band, choir, and orchestra programs are. also across the United States, especially in rural areas, there just isn't an opportunity to have orchestra. In our whole county in Kentucky, where Eastern Kentucky is, the Eastern Kentucky University is, we only have one orchestra program at our own school, our own K through 12 school on campus. And where I taught in Western Oklahoma, there were no orchestras west of Oklahoma City, nor an orchestra where I taught previously in Southwest Missouri. So orchestras seem to be clustering around larger school districts, and there's a much more opportunities for students to be in band or choir than there is orchestra generally across the U.S. Starting around 7th grade, students have the opportunity to participate in district, region, or state level honor groups. They also have solo and ensemble festivals, jazz festivals, marching competitions, summer music camps. So there's a lot of opportunities for students to perform and to get feedback from an audience or judges outside of just their concerts that they perform for their home crowd. So there's a lot of accessory groups and sort of traditions in different states and different parts of each state that create this environment of multiple performances and sort of competition, but not in except for marching competitions, oftentimes more for comments and for a particular rating versus who's number one or who's number two in that sort of standpoint. So a lot of the band and choral programs are tilted toward these competitions or these opportunities for students to perform outside the regular concert series. Most of the students who do well in these honor groups or get 1 ratings at solo and ensemble contest, they often take private lessons, and many of those types of students, that subset of students, are oftentimes on a path toward becoming a music major in college. I'll deal with this a little later in the presentation, but we sort of have different levels. We've got a huge amount of students who are graduating high school, but only much smaller percentage of them are actually involved in one of these music ensembles, and then a smaller part of those are actually going to end up being music majors. So our recruiting pool is very narrowly focused because of that. But the students who are involved more than just playing in the band and playing in the concert oftentimes get attached to private lessons, which oftentimes are college faculty members or college students. So when we start looking at the higher ed side of things, there are a few types of higher education music degrees. The lowest level is the associate's degree, which is usually 2 years. There aren't a whole lot of 2-year degrees just in music. They're traditionally offered by what we call community colleges, but sometimes they can fold into a 4-year degree. So the most common music degree in the U.S. is the bachelor's degree, sometimes referred to as the undergraduate degree. Usually it takes 4 years to complete that degree. After that, you've got your master's degree, which usually takes 2 years, if you go full time, of course, and a PhD or some sort of performance doctorate. We have PhDs mostly in research-based fields like music education, musicology, music theory. Sometimes you have a PhD in performance but most of the time they've transitioned from, instead of having a PhD in performance, to have a doctorate of musical arts in performance. A few universities use the term doctorate of music instead of doctor of music of arts, and some universities use a doctor of arts. It all kind of depends on how that university is structured within the state hierarchy, what the label is. But most of the time the advanced degrees fall into 2 general camps: a research-based degree or a performance-based degree, and the title usually flows along with that. In higher ed in the U.S., we've got a few types of institutions. As mentioned previously, the community college are usually around a particular city or county, and it's usually 2 years. For the most part, a lot of the community colleges don't have really a music department. They don't really offer a music degree. It's a place to get your general education credits or to kind of learn a little bit of a trade. So it is challenging for students who go to a community college without a music unit and then think they can transfer into a four-year degree and be able to finish in 2 years. Most of the United States music curriculum for a four-year degree is spread out equally over 4 years. Music theory is a 2-year sequence, and then you've got to finish that before you can take other advanced classes. So a lot of times students who want to get a music degree, if they start at a community college, they have to be very careful to choose one that has a music program. Otherwise, it's going to probably tack on 3 and maybe 4 years onto the 2 years they've already invested. So the college/university comprehensive, sometimes they're referred to four-year schools, and these oftentimes have the complete units. Somebody comes out of high school and then they start their degree, and then 4 years later they graduate. University, in a strict sense, universities offer both undergraduate and graduate degrees, but the term college is not. It's still kind of a general term for higher education. There are a few very well regarded music units that have a college title that do offer graduate degrees. So sometimes the term college is used for smaller four-year institutions, but not always. So if you're trying to research a college or a university in the United States, most of the time something that has a university in the title will offer graduate degrees and usually be a little bigger, but not always. It's a little bit of a misnomer. We also do have vocational schools that teach trades, plumbing or electrical work, or those sorts of types of trades. Most of the time, they don't have music associated with it, but there's a fair amount of our population that go to trade schools and don't take the 4 years to do a degree in a specific area and have to take other classes that aren't in that area. Most of the four-year programs in the U.S. are considered liberal arts schools, which means that there's a core amount of hours, usually 30 to 36 hours, university credit hours, in general studies, English, math, history, foreign language, science, arts. It's supposed to give students a broad view of the world now that they're fully formed adults. And then they have the major classes beside that. So the general education is part of the liberal arts philosophy, and most four-year degrees have that as a core component, that every student have to complete that course of study in order to get a degree, which is different than the vocational schools that only train you for the skills that you need for that particular job. There's a couple of types of higher education institutions, not-for-profit, which is the vast majority of higher education institutions in the U.S. All state universities and colleges, if they're state-funded, they're not-for-profit. Most community colleges are also not-for-profit, and most private institutions are classified not-for-profit. So there are some for-profit universities. Most of the time, these focus very narrowly on a particular field, like business or engineering or science. Most of these don't have music units at all. There may be some that are out there because we U.S. generally likes to prioritize things that are for profit in our businesses and how can we function. But I'm not aware of any music units at for-profit universities, although there may be some that are out there. State colleges and universities are where the vast majority of students will engage in higher ed in the U.S., and they get money from three different sources. They get money from the state legislature, they get money from tuition, and they get money from donors. So private colleges and universities, they get money from donors and money from tuition. So this is important because there is no national tax, there is no in most instances, no specific state tax that goes toward higher education. Our state legislators, in state by state, decide how much money they're going to invest in their higher education system. So state colleges and universities, we are completely dependent on the politicians to continue to fund us. For most of the states where I've worked, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kentucky, I would think that less than 40% of our operating budget is provided by the state. So we earn the rest of the money through tuition, the students paying money for the classes, and from donors. So a lot of private colleges have large endowments and that have sometimes run into the billions of dollars, and those endowments can help pay for the operation of things. And so the money that they get from tuition from the students is not as critical. It's still they still need the tuition, but they're in a position where they can fund themselves based upon all the donations that they've amassed over the years. So there's a lot of disparity across the states. Some states are very pro-education and pro-higher education, and they fund more money to those colleges and universities. Some other states, they don't, and they prioritize their budgets, in other ways. So putting together a university budget for a state college or university is very complicated in the U.S. because you're hoping that the politicians will continue to fund you at the same level. But over the last 20 or 30 years, we've went from probably 70 or 80% funded colleges, state colleges and universities, probably down to 40% state funded. So a lot of universities are really more private institutions because they're funded directly from the students and donations than they are from their own state. So it does make things challenging. And you go to another state and you have completely different dynamic, and so it's never dull. The cost of higher ed, institutions, generally have to be accredited to get federal student loan money. As of 2023, we have a total student loan debt of $1.7 trillion, and that's for 43.2 million people. The average cost per student or debt per student is $29,000 that they have to pay off. Many are much, much larger than that. In 2021, 54% of students who had completed a bachelor's degree had some sort of student loan, and the average four-year tuition is about $14,000 per year. That's because there's a lot of moderately priced and more inexpensive schools, and there's a few amount of schools that are very expensive. So there's a lot of private, most of the Ivy League type schools, Harvard, Yale, all those schools are very expensive, and kind of brings the average up, but there's not very many of them. So most people can go to a university in their state, not too far from where they live, for about $14,000 a year. So the college expense in the United States is getting more and more expensive, and there's probably no end in sight. Just the personnel costs, the healthcare costs, the energy costs continue to mount, and we get less funding from the state, so we have to increase the tuition to offset the funding from the loss of funding from the state, and it gets very expensive very quickly. So some states are offering free community college, which is really might help and might get a toehold into maybe getting back to free undergraduate college, but they're very only in a handful of states where they're pushing this. And for music units, it doesn't help us a tremendous amount because community colleges typically don't offer as much music experience that they can transfer into a four-year degree as easily as some other degree paths. So the way that everything is structured state by state, most states only have one university that offers a doctorate in music. These have to be approved by the state legislatures, and oftentimes they limit the amount of schools that can offer certain degrees in order to not compete, within the same state. Most states have what we call regional universities that are placed geographically around the state, so that somebody doesn't have to drive, more than an hour or two to get to a four-year institution. It sort of varies out west. It's a little harder to do that because the populations are so sparse. But in most populated states with more than 3 or 4 million people in them, there's usually a handful of regional universities. The music units for these can range anywhere from 50 majors to 200 majors. Most states have one flagship university that's funded by the state, like the University of Kentucky, University of Kansas, University of Oklahoma. Some states have two, have like the University of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Both are big universities that compete with each other. But at least there's one flagship state-funded university, and those music units are oftentimes 300 or more music majors. And many states have high-quality private universities that have large music units, sometimes high-quality music units that are small, but since they're not competing for state funding, it's a slightly different model than the state-funded ones. Some of the state-funded university music units can be quite large. The University of North Texas and Florida State University each have more than 1,000 music majors, which is just, EKU has about 165 music majors, and I can't imagine having almost 10 times that. It's just, those are really, really massive programs that are funded, by the state and student tuition. Just across the U.S., there's about 1,600 institutions that offer some sort of music degree. More than 600 of these are accredited by the National Association of the Schools of Music. This is a music-specific accreditation and something that is very helpful as we work with university administration to justify how we operate and why we cost the way we cost and why we do things the way that we do things. When talking about the specific music degrees in U.S. higher ed, most institutions offer undergraduate performance degrees and music education degrees. Performance degrees are considered easy to offer because oftentimes they double up the same classes that music education majors take. So it's not any more expensive to offer a music performance degree, so therefore a lot of institutions offer a performance degree even if they don't really have the depth or the quality that they should to do a performance degree, but because it doesn't really cost anything more, they oftentimes do offer that. A lot of regional universities, the smaller state schools, some of the regional universities can be quite large, but the smaller state schools oftentimes started as a teaching school, and then music got married to that, so music education has a long history in most music units in the U.S. And probably these two degrees, sort of the conservatory model of trying to get people into professional musicians, and the music education side are sort of the two pillars of all music units, and almost all music degrees sort of diverge from those two starting points. For music ed is probably the most direct music degree that music units offer. It usually leads to certification to teach K through 12 music. So people who get a music ed degree kind of know what their job is going to be. Now it could be, of course, high school choir or high school band or elementary general music, but it's a more one-to-one, where a lot of music degrees are a little more open-ended of where they lead. Each state issues teaching licenses. So if you lived in Kentucky and went to EKU and got a music ed degree, but you wanted to teach in Tennessee, you'd have to get certified to teach in Tennessee. For the most part, there's good reciprocity between the states, but oftentimes there's a few hurdles to overcome. You can't just move into another state and be hired from by a school district. You have to make sure that you meet their requirements. Most of the time it doesn't take any extra coursework, but sometimes you have to take an extra exam or pay a fee or fill out some forms. So it's a state by state process for teaching K through 12 in any discipline. Music industry / business / commercial music. These are degrees that are growing, but sometimes they don't have a direct job. Sometimes there's a parallel to a general business degree or a biology degree that it prepares you to enter multiple different fields, but not always a specific one like music education. So a lot of students, they want to work in a recording studio, they want to make records and all that sort of stuff. And the reality is nobody's hiring in these studios. They're all filled to the brim with recording engineers. So what you really have to do if you want to be in this space is build your own recording studio and start your own company. So these little small recording studios are everywhere. They pop up everywhere, and it's a viable career path, but you also have to be business minded. You have to be able to apply for a business loan and hire workers and all that sort of stuff, and not just be in the mixing booth. So it's an area where there's opportunity, but you also have to be entrepreneurship minded, so that you can think, how can I make a business out of the training that I've gotten? It's a really broad field. You can work in a music store. You can be in artist management. You can work at a performing arts facility. There's a lot of wide array of things. So most music industry type degree programs are very general. The one at EKU's is general. We try to give a wide array of experiences so that they can kind of pick where they want to specialize in, and a lot of times have to do some additional training to be successful in that space, but it's more general than specific, like music education, where you're going to be teaching K through 12 students. These are some of the degree options that are common at especially big universities in the U.S., where you can get undergraduate degrees or graduate level degrees in these areas, but only the very large music units are going to offer all of these. At EKU, for example, we offer 4 undergraduate degrees and 3 graduate degrees. The undergraduate degrees: music education, performance, composition, and music industry, and the graduate degrees are conducting, music education, and performance. Of course, University of Kentucky, just up the road, they offer most of these degrees at the graduate level as well. But there's definitely options for graduate school as far as what you are wanting to take and what you're wanting to do. You may have to move out of state for a particular degree program, but if there's a particular area of music that you are interested in, there's probably a similarly related graduate degree program. So I'm not quite sure the audience of this this week, but I thought sometimes people may be thinking about getting into higher ed teaching, and wanted to just briefly go over some opportunities for there. In the U.S., it's very rare to get hired into a music unit without a completed doctorate. In some some situations where they need a director of bands and also do music ed at a small school. They might only have their master's, but for the most part, if the music unit has more than 100 majors, almost everybody's going to have a completed doctorate who is either applying for it or is working in the unit. It's a really competitive marketplace. Especially for performance majors who want to be studio teachers, if they want to be a piano teacher, if they want to be a saxophone teacher in college, it's very competitive. I met a couple weeks ago with some representatives from Yamaha who were visiting campuses in Kentucky and their higher education division, and the lead person has his doctorate in saxophone performance from a very good school, and he was unable to get a job teaching higher ed, and now he's working for Yamaha. So it's competitive. Performance majors oftentimes will, if they can't find a college job, will join a military band for a while, and sometimes they have to find other career paths in general. I've worked at 3 different music units and hired in all 3 of those in 3 different states. Most job postings have had at least 40 applicants. When I've advertised for piano or voice, those have run into the 70s and 80s. And almost all of those, at least 90%, have had completed doctorates or were completing their doctorate the year that they applied for the job. So it's very competitive. It's rewarding work, but it is there's a lot of people vying for each individual job. When you do get hired for the first time, oftentimes it's going to be at a small religious school or a regional university or community college. Faculty are expected to teach in multiple disciplines, so they might need you to teach saxophone, clarinet, music theory, and direct a band at very small units. So having some flexibility in mind is helpful. It can also be sort of challenging to move up to larger universities. So if you stay at a really small place for 10 or 15 years, it's going to be a challenge to move to a larger school. Oftentimes, even larger schools are advertising for entry-level, assistant professors, and the pay gap, you're probably going to have to take a pay cut even to move into that. So it is can be challenging, but you do see people move up. They get a small job at a small school, and then move up to a medium-sized school and move up to a large school within 6 or 7 years. But oftentimes it's challenge unless you get hired right out of the gate at a medium-sized school to get to a large school if you're in your current position for too long. I do want to say, as someone who's been at 2 smaller regional universities and now at a larger regional university, larger music unit does not mean better. In a lot of cases, I've got friends at flagship universities and colleagues there that they're so much more stressed out than people at some smaller colleges. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. Bigger doesn't not necessarily mean better. You always think about what's your day-to-day look like, and who are the people who are around you, who you're teaching with, and does that make your life fulfilling versus trying to get to some sort of top university, which is really hard to get to because I don't think that there is one. For international applicants, for either students or faculty, there are many institutions in the U.S. that value international expertise. Funding for international students and faculty is a challenge. Sometimes in the hiring process, we have to justify why an international candidate is more qualified than an American citizen, and sometimes the music unit has to pay for the sponsorship of that. Some schools will offer large scholarship for international students, and some see them as paying triple the cost of a domestic student and building a budget based upon that. So it really is institution specific. So if you're interested in working in higher ed in the U.S., or if you're interested in going to school for music in the U.S., research the institutions, find out if what the funding is there an international student waiver, or do you have to always pay everything? There's lots of things to look through, and it can vary from 2 or 3 different universities in the same state. I wanted to wrap up with just talking about recruiting music students into higher education music for those of you who might be interested in this, because I think it plays into the scope of what degrees we offer and what we do through K-12 music, and how do we funnel these students in. The great thing about music education in general for people who go out and teach K through 12 music is that they are hopefully an ambassador for your university to their music students, and hopefully can create some sort of revolving door where you get a good band director out there, and the band director does great things in the schools. They encourage their students to look at your university, to go to music, and we have this nice little, revolving door through that. Most recruiting focuses on students in band, choir, or orchestra. Just because those are designated ensembles within the high school, and already exist, and you're going to go there, and you're going to get probably 90% of your music majors from one of these 3 ensembles. Piano and guitar recruiting is much more challenging because they oftentimes don't have programs in high school, and they have to engage with multiple private teachers in order to get even names or contact information for prospective piano majors or prospective guitar majors. When we think about these small percentages, if you have a high school of 1,000 people, there might be 100 people in the band, and out of that 100 people in the band, there might be 10 that graduate in any given year, and of those 10, maybe 2 or 3 actually end up being music majors. So all the music units in the U.S. were competing for the same students in a very small pool, and we've got to figure out how to make our school more attractive than another university's. So quality music students who are getting ones in their competitions, who are making first chair in state level honor groups, they oftentimes have multiple schools to choose from, and making connections with those students and the scholarship offer as a package can get the student to a particular institution. Scholarships drive a lot of students. Many more students are not wanting to take out student loans or don't want to max out their student loans. So if one school offers a $2,000 semester scholarship and another offers a $500 music scholarship, sometimes that makes the determination. But sometimes that school that offered the higher music scholarship is more expensive to go there, so maybe that $1,000 music scholarship or $2,000 scholarship doesn't go as far at a bigger institution as it would at a smaller institution. So from our standpoint, especially at EKU, is we want to make a positive connection to the students. We want them to identify with us or a faculty member that we have, and that connection maybe will override any sort of financial concerns that they want. If they feel like they're going to get the best education with us, that's what we want, and not necessarily to just go to the school that has gives you the highest scholarship amount. So some of these very large music units, they don't really have to worry about recruiting at the undergraduate level. Oftentimes they get students, the top tier music students, looking at them already because they are the biggest or one of the biggest music units in the state. Not saying that they don't recruit, but they oftentimes don't have to do as much active recruiting at the undergraduate level because they're going to get a pretty steady flow of students at least looking and considering them, just because they're so massive. So regional universities like EKU, we have to push really hard every year. If we took a break from recruiting in 4 years, we wouldn't have any students. So we have to go 100 miles an hour every year in order to maintain our level. And if we want to grow, then we have to look for inventive ways to get bigger. So, just a thumbnail approach of my recruiting approach, or thumbnail sketch of my recruiting approach. I believe in multiple touch points over many years. We're not just going after seniors in high school. We're looking at 7th and 8th graders and juniors and seniors in high school, middle school bands, honor groups, summer music camps, high school visits, tours, all this sort of stuff. Provides a positive interaction that the prospective students has with our institution or our faculty members, and we want to build that relationship over time. We don't want to just swoop in, in January of a student's senior year and say, "Hey, you should come to EKU. We do all these great things." And if they're like, "Who are you?" Then we haven't done a very good job at doing that. So we want to have a goal of helping get students where they want to go, and not necessarily just to EKU. We want to be a resource for our younger musicians in our area, and to get them where they want to go. And hopefully they'll choose EKU. But if they don't, then we've done our part and hopefully gotten them where they belong. So sometimes the students don't choose us, and sometimes they do, and that's okay. Whenever we have auditions for our scholarships and our entry into the School of Music at EKU, if there's a student who we don't know, we failed somewhere along the line. So every student that comes to audition for us, we should have had some sort of interaction with them at some point. That's our goal. Scholarship offer is only a part of it, but to some people, it's a big part of it. My general philosophy is that, and this is sort of a statement that's mostly attributed to Maya Angelou, but not in a direct way. But in recruiting standpoint, potential music students won't remember everything that you tell them, but they'll remember how they made you feel. So if we make students feel like they're wanted here, that they belong here, that we can offer things to value to them, and that we care about them as a person, that's what they're going to remember. They're not going to remember all the this $500 scholarship versus $1,000 scholarship. They're hopefully going to identify with us and multiple faculty members, but at least one of our faculty members. So I covered a lot of ground, may have gone a little over time than what I was slotted for, but I hope that gives you some idea and some overview of how music works in the United States from kindergarten up through higher education. I don't speak Portuguese, but I am always up for a discussion or some answering questions via email. My email is listed on this slide. Please reach out to me, but please, if you can, provide some translation if you don't speak English, and I will try to do the same. So if I provide some translation in a response in Portuguese and it's not accurate, I'm sorry. I did the best with the technology that I could in that stint. So, but I'm very happy to be part of this conference, and I hope that things go well for the rest of the week.